Okay, so the Amazon marketplace is heating up. There's more products than ever. There's more revenue than ever. Roughly 3 billion visitors reach their website each month. So this ecosystem is thriving. This month, we're digging into all things commerce. This is one of our innovation blocks, which is around commerce evolution. So we wanted to dig into everything from marketing software to marketplace models, direct to consumer, to what's happening in brick and mortar, to everything from logistics and warehousing tools that are out there on the market today. Now, what we know is 22% of sellers sell exclusively or earn their income exclusively on Amazon. And ultimately, how we view that stat is that 78% of sellers are doing other things, are focused in potentially other ways. And that means a razor focused seller or commercializing the Amazon ecosystem could potentially come in and build a business. This is why we are bringing Jake Barnett. He worked at two companies that focus purely on buying Amazon sellers. And we think he can bring great insights into understanding who an Amazon seller is through the eyes of an Amazon buyer. And we wanted to welcome him to the series today, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess obviously just kick it off, share a little bit about your background and kind of general introduction.
Yeah, sure. So my background was traditionally in like enterprise sales for software, a lot of tech startups, software as a service, cloud early on, back starting in like 2007, 2008, when it was just Salesforce kind of pioneering. My focus has always been kind of on customer acquisition, and a lot of what I did was selling to e-commerce vendors, small, medium, large software packages ranging from a few thousand to six figures. Couple years ago, I came across this FBA aggregation roll-up idea in space. Was looking for kind of a pivot in my own career, something new, a new challenge, and came across Alpha Rock Capital, which was one of these early acquirers. Really just loved the space. I had always known a lot of kind of successful FBA business owners, as well as a lot of the ecosystem players, whether it's some software, tax, marketing agencies in the space. So I'd always been excited about it. But I never really had a way to get into it, but came across this idea to go out and purchase these businesses and thought that, hey, I can kind of combine my ability to acquire customers to the idea of deal flow and originating, M&A transactions for the space. So that was almost about 2 years ago now. Had a brief stint with Alpha Rock Capital. We did something like 4 or 5 acquisitions of kind of six-figure sellers when I was with them. In December 2019, I joined Boosted Commerce, their head of business development. Spent a year with them. I actually just left about a month ago. But did a number of deals with Boosted. They're one of these really exciting aggregators who've come into the space. They raised something like 87 million last year. One of 10 or 15 others that have raised 10 to 100 million. So Boosted, really exciting company. I just left them about a month ago, and I've recently joined a firm called Fortinet, which is a boutique investment bank focused on FBA sellers and kind of helping them prepare for sell and maximize their value when they're exiting. So, I've kind of switched teams to get onto the sell side, and happy to kind of get into that. And there's a lot of dynamics in the space which have kind of influenced my decision, but it's been an incredible journey in the last 2 years, seeing this idea of acquiring FBA businesses go from kind of niche and where a lot of people just didn't really know they could even sell their business to the point we're at now, where $1.5 billion in capital has rushed into the space, dozens of competitors, and like it's just a really hot market. It's a great time to be an FBA business owner. So yeah, that's what I've been working on the last 2 years. Really excited to join Fortinet, and I love the idea of helping these small business owners maximize their value when they're looking at selling. I think it's a really interesting group of entrepreneurs. But yeah, that's just kind of how a little bit about my journey and how I got into it. Another thing which I think kind of fits into this FBA ecosystem is, I've been this digital nomad for about 10 or 11 years now, kind of early on. And now it's this big trend, especially with COVID, everybody working from home, kind of been freed from that, the need to be into the office. But I've lived in like 5 or 6 countries. I now speak something like 3 languages.
Wow.
Yeah, spent a lot of time in Asia and the Philippines. I spent a lot of time in Latin America, in Argentina, Colombia, and Brazil. And yeah, it's great to you know, great to have this community of digital nomads, which I've seen just kind of progress from, travel bloggers that were just making a few bucks to now where you have, 8-figure Amazon sellers. You got some really successful SaaS businesses that have just started, from their beginning as, digital first, no office type companies. So, that for me, I look at as kind of like future of being an entrepreneur. So it's been cool being part of that community and seeing that develop as well. Um,
And where are
yeah,
you at
little
now? Where are
about
you
me.
located now?
Currently in Mexico City,
Nice.
really cool, beautiful, beautiful city. Um, it's nice getting a little mix of the, culture, the restaurants as much as we can with these COVID restrictions. But yeah, I've been in Mexico the last few months off and on, and it's an awesome place. Yeah, I'm enjoying exploring it.
Nice. Yeah. So let's dig a little bit into what maybe the typical seller looks like from the seat you were sitting in. What is a typical Amazon seller in your eyes?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, there's kind of a few profiles which I think kind of like overlap each other. One thing that I've seen a lot of and I really love is these family combinations. So, uh, husband wife combos, father son, those types of teams. It's really an owner operator. So these are not, big organizations. I think one of the things that attracted a lot of people into FBA was the kind of just, you know minimalist operating model. FBA does a lot of the work for you. A lot of it's digital. You don't have the overhead. So I think what attracted a lot of people into the space was the idea of, not having a boss, not having an office, working from wherever you want. So you get a lot of the digital nomads. Um, I've seen a lot of people that were, kind of working corporate and looking to escape it. Um, One thing that I've seen is just kind of a characteristic across a lot of these really successful sellers is, this kind of hacker mentality. Um, Amazon FBA, still very new, growing fast. Amazon always kind of changing the rules of the game. So, all these people kind of have a hacker mentality where they've figured out, how to work within the black box of Amazon FBA and how to make it really successful. But yeah, I've talked to anybody from one seller who was like 22, sold his business for $5 million, a deal that I would have loved to have, but he really got a top valuation. To a guy that was like, I think 70, making like $1 million a year profit and just enjoying the ride and doing the advertising and all that. So it's a diverse it's like a diverse group, but it hasn't been corporate, but you're seeing a lot more groups come in, whether they're aggregators or whether they're like people building businesses organically on Amazon and then just kind of building them to the point where they have to create the corporate infrastructure.
Right. What do you think's the right? This is like 3.0, 2.0, whatever point oh we want to frame it as. In some cases, I've heard like 5.0, right, where you're going back almost 20 plus years of building this ecosystem out. What do you think was the biggest kind of roadblock for some of these sellers? Was it just kind of like personal decisions, right? I don't necessarily want to build anything other than this single product and kind of work within your own lane versus I'm trying to build kind of a arsenal of products and categories and honestly commercialize and professionalize the operations. And essentially beyond that, and we have more conversations regarding this, is these other tools, right, that really allow and empower either commercialized sellers, professional sellers to come in and use kind of these pieces that are being built, whether it's third party on demand warehousing and logistics, right? Everything was in one ecosystem at one point, but we're starting to see the early roots of and sprouts of the potential of moving outside, and not even moving outside, but at least controlling your own destiny within the ecosystem. And that means maybe fulfilling on your own, maybe creating and manufacturing on your own, warehousing on your own. But at the end of the day, what do you think it was? Is that some of the roadblocks that maybe that individual that was making maybe $1 million a year?
Yeah, I mean, interesting question. I think if you look at the platforms like Amazon and before it, like Facebook with their advertising ecosystem and Google with SEO and PPC, they really leveled the playing field. First of all, you didn't need to have a warehouse, you didn't need to, building a website, bringing in all those customers, all were just super expensive, capital intensive like operations. So they leveled the playing field, and then they also opened up these, huge new markets. That's also one of the things that kind of turned me on to FBA and the roll up is, I saw a lot of those similarities in, like I said, with Facebook and with Google, where you had this ecosystem of entrepreneurs that were just rushing in to this whole new market, where I think at first it was just the, first person there kind of got it and was successful. They put up a website on Google, they started ranking, they didn't have to spend any money on ads, and then the money just started coming in. I think that was similar with a lot of the FBA businesses at the beginning. People just found a niche. A lot of times, I think sellers will admit it, the way that they look at product categories and niches is just they're going to try 100 things and 5 of them hopefully are going to work. So they were just trying to find unexploited niches and be that first mover and get that kind of review moat up and going. Certainly, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I think Amazon really democratized it with FBA, making it easy to get customers and get product to them. It's interesting now because I think we're seeing a little bit of like the opposite happening. Amazon is in some ways making it more difficult for new sellers to get onto the platform. They're making it more difficult to launch new products. For example, if you launch a new listing, you can only inbound 200 units into FBA when you start. So, I mean, that's nothing for most sellers. So, they've really made it a lot more difficult, which I think is making it more important for, those third-party systems and services that you mentioned, especially like 3PLs where you can do fulfilled by merchant. It's just overall, Amazon's making it more difficult. I think they have good reasons for it. They want to control their platform. They don't want as many junk sellers, but it's becoming kind of less democratized and harder, I think, for the seller to kind of get in there and just do it through FBA. But it's been really cool seeing the ecosystem of these third-party services, software, et cetera, coming in and helping the space. And like you said, I think that in the end, it's helping to build more sustainable businesses where you're not just relying on Amazon. Walmart.com is really helping there too. Shopify, you can get the diversification on both sales as well as supply chain, et cetera.
For sure. Even eBay. I mean, we heard eBay report earnings recently, and while it's it's considered very legacy and kind of old school in nature in terms of either the buyer or the seller base, they do have a lot of interesting things going on there from a product development side and making it easier for that seller to onboard. So kind of going back to the professional investors stepping in here, what do they see from your eyes, or what did you see, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what got a lot of people excited at the beginning, 2-3 years ago, you have somebody like Thrasio, the elephant in the room that's only started two or 3 years ago. I think it was multiples, really. I think it was valuations. You could get these businesses that were growing 50% year over year, 20, 30% plus margins, and you could get them for a 2 or a 3 times, last 12 months EBITDA. That's a great deal, kind of regardless of the industry or the business, I think. On top of that, of course, you've got the trends in the space. Amazon is, growing as a percentage of e-commerce, and e-commerce is growing as a percentage of retail. So that's really, I think, what's interesting to most of these investors is relatively low multiples, although we've seen that go up a lot. And just thinking, hey, this is the future of commerce. It's going to be, some combination of e-commerce, FBA, select brick and mortar, but this is kind of where the puck is going to be. And I think that's what's attracting a lot of these investors into the space.
Yeah. Where did you see most of the selling coming from? Is it the $50 million kind of cohort of revenue generators annually, or is it the and I'm talking about the seller level, not necessarily the product level, but the seller level, or was it an arsenal of $1 million sellers? Kind of where was the original? I guess, yeah, maybe if you take us back 2 years, you look at who was selling originally, who's selling now, and kind of probably multiple pressures in terms of exit multiples for these sellers. Is the pressure more on the lower end or the higher end? Why I bring that up? Because obviously recently we saw a couple acquisitions, one at 3.5 or 3.8 times EBITDA. We've also heard of multiples higher than that in certain categories or spaces. Kind of what's driving the difference potentially within maybe higher, lower sellers, type of product, not type of product, and what you saw and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, sure. Even in the last 2 years, I think you've seen the number of businesses on Amazon that are doing, let's say, $1 million plus sales increased a lot, especially with the pandemic. I got in originally with Alpha Rock Capital, who was kind of focused on folks that were doing around $200,000 to $500,000, yearly sales. So these were smaller deals than what a lot of the folks are looking for now. I think most of the investors, though, are not looking for those 30, 40, $50 million players that are kind of focused on Amazon. There are some of those folks, and it's been amazing seeing some of these groups just grow organically to, that size just on Amazon. But I think the sweet spot most of the buyers are looking for is kind of that $1 to $10 million annual revenue range with that kind of 20, 30, 40% profit margins. It seems to be a sweet spot, for a couple reasons. I think one of the main ones is just that, once you get to that $10 million plus annual sales, it really becomes a real company rather than just the owner operator. It requires a lot more sophistication. It's going to require more staff. It's going to require more compliance. You're going to have to be active on a lot of different channels, including Amazon International, as well as, all these Walmart, Etsy, etc. So I think there's just kind of a philosophical breaking point there where a lot of these sellers, what made them successful getting to 1 to 10 million in annual sales is not the same skill set that is going to get them from 10 to 50. So I think that drives a lot of these folks to look at selling. They simply don't have the desire or the capability or the capacity to want to go and build it into a $50 million company. I think that's most of them. A lot of them, they say, hey, let's look at selling. What I'm good at, what I enjoy doing is building a brand, and let me sell it and I'll take that money and I'll go do it again. And I'll sell that one in another year or two.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense, right? Because we've seen around like $1 billion of capital raised in this space, maybe a little higher now. Every week that goes by, you hear some funding round.
Yeah.
And that would make more sense, obviously, as deal sizes get bigger from a capital raising perspective for the acquirers, that simply the checks could get bigger. Therefore, potentially the pressures kind of in that $1 to $10 million revenue ballpark. Where a lot of the capital is probably at least starting out, right? New capital raising $100 million. If they're paying, let's just say 1 times revenue in this case, they would have to, obviously, that would be a 10% piece of their book that they would have to allocate out. So that firm's probably starting in the $1 to $5 million range, right? With their first couple acquisitions, I suppose. Now, like, what's interesting here is that this is all taking place, at least this kind of acceleration, it seems, during COVID, right? At the kind of back half of COVID, or hopefully it's the back half, but that it is taking place now. Why do you think, kind of probably stepping back and thinking about what were the effects in general that you saw within the community and ecosystem, and potentially why is it happening now and accelerating now as opposed to maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. And I'm sure it was surfacing behind the scenes, but at the same time, what's taking place? Is it that unlock of international? Is it just the realization that Amazon does matter, and it's kind of locked itself in as kind of the leader in the space, considering what they did over the last 12 months in 2020? Like, what are you seeing as COVID as being kind of what seems to be this unlock of interest and capital to the space?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the perfect storm, kind of all the things that you just mentioned. So,
Yeah.
I think that interest was, building, and I imagine that some of the big players were, they were active before COVID. So these things were already happening, but we just saw such a massive shift to buying online, buying Amazon, people relying on Amazon for their everyday, life and purchases. So I think it's just this kind of perfect storm where, you know, it was going to happen anyways. And COVID, like so many things, it just sped up the timeline by 5, 10 years. I remember coming into it and hearing about Alpha Rock and what they were doing and the multiples they were paying. And I said, this is too good to be true. It's going to happen quick. You got to move fast. And it happened a lot quicker than I expected. COVID certainly made that happen faster. But yeah, it's just this combination of a lot of like new money coming into the space. I mean, rates are super low. People are chasing returns, and Amazon's where the growth is at. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then obviously we've shifted forward. So what like the next 3, 5 years, what do you expect in the space? Or
Yeah.
Amazon, like where are they headed in your view? They're probably two distinct things, but they kind of overlap in terms of direction.
Yeah, like a few things that I'm looking forward to that I'd love to see, like Walmart.com is one of them where I think I see more folks that are, being successful on Walmart, and that's growing kind of slowly but steadily. I've seen some folks that I just talked to a seller the other day that, 2019 was 100% FBA, 2020, he's 20% Walmart.com. So I think that is something that personally I'm looking forward to seeing, because a lot of these owners of businesses are just held captive to Amazon, and it can be a tough thing. So that's one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing continue. It's interesting with the whole acquisition space. I mean, there's been so much money coming in, and there's so many different players that are going after what's kind of a limited set of deals. There's varying numbers or estimates of how many sellers are doing like over $1 million in sales on Amazon, probably somewhere in the range of like 10 to 30,000, kind of depending on the profile. How many of those are going to be for sale at any given time is some fraction of it. So you have $1.5 billion in capital and 30, 40, 50 buyers that are all chasing these same deals. So, certainly have seen multiples rise. I think that's only going to continue. But, it'll be interesting to see in the next 12 to 24 months what happens with a lot of those players. Some of them are going to fail. How many of those are going to end up, having to fire sale their portfolio? Are we going to see a drop in multiples because of it, because of some of these folks failing? Or is it just going to keep exploding to where, we saw a 2 to 3 multiple a year ago? Now it's something like 4 to 6. And is it going to go up, just keep going up? So I'd love to be able to predict that. I think those are the two options. I'm not sure which way it'll go. I think it could happen either way.
Right. No, that makes sense. And uh, digging a little deeper in terms of when you guys were making these acquisitions, right? It was what were you looking for outside of just multiple and kind of margins, right? It was,
Yeah.
we have the concept of kind of digital real estate, digital shelf space that you spoke about it a little bit before, is that kind of review product listing
Mm.
mode. Like, what were you looking at specifically in that? And in addition to, is once you have a product or a suite of products, what was the focus there? Was it to drive more products across the suite, across the brand? Was there ever a thought of, hey, this could be a standalone product and really go direct to consumer through traditional marketing channels, Google, Facebook, things like that? be able to carry its own weight on its own, let's say, website, Shopify, something
Mhm.
like that? Like what was the thinking internally?
Yeah. I think that if you could just point to one single thing, it would be the review moat. And this is the concept that, you have substantially more and better reviews than your direct competitors. That is one of the biggest, influencers in terms of your ranking on Amazon. And of course, the higher your rank, the more sales that you're going to get. So it's one of the only kind of tangible things that when you're looking at acquiring one of these Amazon brands that you can actually go and acquire and have some degree of certainty that will, stay the same. Amazon has made it much more difficult to fake reviews. They've also taken away a lot of reviews from bad actors, from people that were doing, techniques that weren't terms of service compliant. So, I think that's if you could point to one thing, it would say, hey, we want a product that has more and better reviews, substantially more than their competitors, because that is going to be harder for new entrants to come and overtake you on. Maybe they can beat you on price. It's pretty competitive. There's a lot of different variables, but the one thing you can really buy is these is the reviews. So I think that's something that's spread across category or business case. It could be something that's a not sexy household good, a frying pan, whatever it might be, where you're not going to look at building that into a brand. It's really just a product. The aggregators, I think, are more than happy to have it. That's kind of their bread and butter. At the same time, I've seen a lot of deals where it's an FBA first brand. That's where they got their start, in areas like health and beauty, children, pet, where they come to market and the buyers get really excited for exactly what you just said. They say, hey, they're killing it on FBA. Let's see, how do we expand there, whether it's UK, EU, et cetera. And then how do we, launch this on Shopify? How do we make it into a real quote unquote brand where, it's a whole different use case, maybe, spin that off at some point, but really grow it from a 2, 3, 5x business to saying, hey, how do you double, triple sales, and then look at a 8 to 10x multiple on exit, something like that. So that, I think, really excites the buyers, the aggregators, those types of situations. But they're not most of the businesses on Amazon, and when they come to market, there's a lot of interest. So they're hard deals to land.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that speaks to a little bit of when you think of the moat, right? Again, just emphasizing what you said is my original stats at the beginning of this: 78% of sellers are doing other things. And what does that ultimately mean? If you try to like dig that back, you think about if you do have a top ranking product and it's selling and it's kind of on autopilot, it's really hard to drive sales above it or take kind of search results above it as this product before you or number 1, 2, or 3, 4, 5 has already established position and is already going through kind of the Amazon FBA kind of ecosystem of that flywheel. So that's yeah, that says a lot for sure. I don't know if there
Yeah.
was anything out there that you thought was like super interesting that you guys acquired or anything else that you missed on that you wished you owned, and it was more like a cool product with a cool brand.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite overall business was this one that I mentioned earlier. This guy who's like 70, living in California, never wants to retire, doesn't want to sell his business because he's loving it. And this is one where it was like the guy had like a tooth replacement. So if you lost a tooth, you could put it in, and like it was cheaper and easier than going and getting dentures or whatever it might be. It's a weird product. It's one that I hope I won't have to use anytime soon. But this guy was just killing it. His margins were like 50% plus on Amazon. I was like, how do you do that? Amazon fees are usually half that. And he was growing so fast, and he was, working on it, but it wasn't a 50-hour job for him. I just thought that was like one of the coolest businesses. I wish I could have convinced him to sell, tried to go after the deal. But he's living his best life. That was one that's really cool. I mean, the super cool part about what I've been doing is I've seen so many deals. I've probably talked to like 500 sellers in the last 2 years, and kind of gotten to know a lot of them intimately with their financials and just personally as well. And seen a lot of really cool businesses. There's this one scooter business that went to market last year that it's like a razor scooter alternative. Really, just super successful business. These are some ultra orthodox Jewish guys in Brooklyn that just absolutely killing it. That was a deal everybody wanted. In the end, the guy, really got a great price for it. That was one where I think we would have loved to have had it. And that I think is one where, it's not just a product on Amazon. It's one where I think buyers were looking to say, hey, how do we turn this into a real brand? How do we really make this one blow up? Like you were saying. Yeah, I've seen a lot of really cool businesses.
Cool. Yeah, those are the first one's definitely interesting to say the least. Nice. Where we'll end there. I think that's a good place to end. Where can people find obviously more information about you? Kind of anything that you wanted to share before kind of you head out.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love connecting on LinkedIn, Jake Barnett. Look me up there. If you're an FBA business owner, please check out fortinet.net. Love to talk to you if, about whatever, shoot the crap and see how I can help you maximize value. And yeah, appreciate you having me on. Really fun discussion. And yeah, I love talking about stuff.
Nice. Well, I appreciate sharing with us, and yeah, appreciate coming on, and we'll be in touch.
Cool. Sounds good. See you, Sean.